Hi, everybody. It is Brother Kenneth yet again for another episode of The Art of the Deals. All right. So I want to talk about something that's rather sad. It's when you have an individual in your life, a child, and that could be somebody in their 20s. They're always our children. And it could be your spouse. In some certain sense, it could be a relative, mother or father. Especially when they live in the same house, it's a lot worse because they're dealing with it on a level every day. And one of the problems that begins with this thing is when they're at a certain age, they don't have legal rights to be able to make decisions for them. They can't ask priests to come over if the person doesn't want to, if they're over 18 specifically. So there's a whole new different thing that goes on there. And then what are you going to do? If you send them to a psychologist, and the psychologist is neo-atheist, like they always are. I don't care if they think they go to church or not. If they don't understand how this stuff works, they're going to enjoy patting them on the back with a sign that says crazy, stamp them to be Missouri certified or whatever state you're in. That's, they like diagnosing only when it fits their profession, because when it doesn't, they don't know what to do with it, and they rather just give you a pill. So don't trust the pseudoscience of psychology to that point, okay? Because they'll probably make recommendations to the state. You don't want to give up your life, as someone who's going to have to prove that you're sane when you're actually demonically possessed. I'm just not that people reason on that level when they are demonically possessed. But saying it right now, don't look ahead to the point oh, the government will save me or they'll fund me. There is a certain stage, of course, when the person is going to be a harm to themselves or a harm to others. They might be damaging or destructive. You might want to even consider that, that they might have to be detained in some fashion where they can't hurt themselves. And then what are you going to do? Sometimes people have turned themselves into psychiatric institutes, and they stayed there under observation for 24 hours, and then they got back out again. Well, that demonics are going to behave themselves in some cases, instead of acting like these flacca guys who would just want to go eat the whole face off of a homeless man. Yeah, it's disgusting. It's kind of like the new PCP. So anyway, those are things to consider, and it's in a vlog by itself, the legal implications and all that, and how do you get them help. But what you're really stuck with is when they say no, they don't want any help, they don't want to go to church, they don't want to say any prayers, and then most of the time we find out that they were always like that. It didn't have to get possessed before that happened, so you have to try to weed it out, what are they calling possessed? What do they consider possessed? Just being evil, or being kind of malicious, or something less than positive to be in your presence? So that has to be gone through and diagnosed. But for the most part, we're already in an uphill battle, because if the person doesn't want to do any of the above, and they can't blame it on the spirit, saying that's why they don't want to go to church, that's why they don't want to pray, that's why they refuse to help themselves, that's why they refuse to recognize that they have some sort of evil attachment, if they do. It's like the alcoholic, that the whole family has to get together, or you have to trick the guy and lead him down to the Betty Ford Clinic or whatever clinic they got that's local for triple, what's that called again? Alcoholics Anonymous, AA. So, and this is what you're dealing with here. You're dealing with adults who are not willing to help themselves. And alcoholism is a certain way. It's demonic, because when they get to a certain level, they black out and they forget everything they've done, and they didn't do good things. They do evil stuff. You even sleep with women when they love their wife. It's like, who is this man? And getting drunk and wrecking their car, theft. How about sleepwalking and not remember eating raw meat? I mean, you get some kind of weird things going on with this anyway. Okay, so what are you left to do? And this is in the extreme cases. I guess I could work backwards and talk about when you do it at a level, but we're only keeping this, again, 15 minutes maximum at the most. Okay, so some of the things you're going to be left to do is that when you have a wayward spouse, as some denominations, they call it a Jezebel spirit, for example, when the person just decides that everything you do is wrong, and and they ignore anything you've done that was right, even if 100 things were done right and were good, that all they can focus on is the one thing you did wrong, maybe even 15 years ago. It's a spirit of a sort, but it's not demonic oppression and possession. So don't get there like Bob Larson, kicking out the demon of smoking, as if it's an exorcism, because it's not. It's just another one of these things. And marriages, I guess, could be covered in another one. We volunteer at the diocese to give the formation kind of initial 6 weeks, that primes them to get married. And that's one of the other ways that we contribute to the church. And we're used to dealing with couples because couples are usually in trouble when there's a presence of a demonic spirit, not just a possessed husband or something, but a haunted house in itself, because it raises anxiety and brings a lot of other attributes with it that are negative, designed to split up the family because they hate the family. Okay, so let's say it's a husband. It seems like a more common one. I don't really get the husbands calling asking about the wife. What are they? Not really sure. We can talk about statistics another time. It's sad. And far too many times they don't want help. So what do you do when all those things are exhausted? We're not going to talk about how and all this other stuff, or how to try to convince them, because at some point it's even beyond your hands. If you are their spouse, you have a legal right to say prayers. You don't have to say it over them in person or have somebody pin them down or anything like that. Even deliverance prayers. You can say them remotely. You can say them if he runs and goes and moves him and his mother for a while. And you can say him remotely. You just mention his name in there, and so that he's specifically mentioned. We have a prayer on our website, swordofsaintmichael.org, that is composed of that. But you have to change some of the attributes, like it says, demon of. And if this attribute doesn't fit, write your own in. If you know that he has some sort of pride and arrogance, narcissism, and that's not in there, you write that in. You want to cover all of their attributes. And it's probably not going to be that difficult to dig up their negatives when they're in this stage. This is a slow thing, and I tell people when you're working on, because it's your obligation as a spouse to pray for your spouse. That's part of your marriage vows. You didn't just get married to see what can you do for me lately. That whole idea. It's like, what do they do about me? What they do with me, what they do for me, and all that stuff. It's not all about you. Marriage and true, what they call agape love, you loving them. Not like, how many ways can they love me? They don't really love me this way. They don't give me gifts all the time. So knock that off. Okay, so here's what you got to do. You're going to have to hit them with a battery of please. And you're just going to have to wait. And your ultimate goal is going to have to be, you got to think long term. Don't think like any minute now, any minute he'll turn, or any month, or any, even any year. Just like when you have kids who've fallen away and they're into drugs, they married some prostitute, you name it, that you're going to end up having to pray and wait on God's time. And guess what? God's time is held up by whose time? Our time, human nature and their free will. The free will of humans hold it up all the time. God doesn't force anybody to anything. That's what you're waiting. You're waiting for all the abundance of graces said in prayers on their behalf to take its toll. Sometimes it's not going to happen until the day they die. So be prepared on the worst case scenario and make your peace with God. This isn't for you so you can hang out with your spouse and get him back the way he used to be. That you might be praying your whole life to save his soul so that he is saved on his deathbed. Just like St. Rita. Read the story about St. Rita. I think literally that was what happened. And I'm not going to tell the story because it's a little long. Maybe we could bring it up in relationships. It's an example of love by St. Rita, for example, there. There's a nice video out about it, and it's about 3 hours long. I recommend watching it. Okay. So, Chaplet of Divine Mercy. That's Sister Faustina's prayer, and we know there's Divine Mercy Sunday and so forth. But you say it on behalf of the person, spouse, kid. We're focusing on an adult here for the most part. You say it you're pleading with Jesus under this devotion, the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, Jesus, I trust in thee. It's a newer devotion. It's not the Sacred Heart devotion. Jesus did not pierce the Sacred Heart on everyone, but the particular devotions are what they are. Chaplet of Divine Mercy works. We started using it in spiritual warfare. Others may not even caught on to this idea yet, because the idea is there's a debt to pay when they're overcome by a demon, and it's like you owe somebody money. Let's say you're a gal and you're in Mexico and you owe somebody money. They'll turn you into a prostitute or who knows what, sell you as a slave. But, as a person in this world, who is going to pay the debt for the possessed? They're bankrupt on their spiritual side, and the demon took advantage of it and says, I'm taking possession of them, just like a car being repossessed, if you pardon the expression there, because that happens to kind of fit the scenario maybe a little better than the other one. And so someone's got to pay to the ransom to get them back to the state where they can start doing things on their own, because when they're possessed, they can't say the Hail Mary, they can't say nothing. How are they going to do prayer or penance? And how are they going to properly offer their, how about even fasting, which is a penance in itself, or anything, go to church, they're in a bad position right where they are. And guys, don't blame. See, when they're not really possessed, it's a lot of times just free will and attitude, and they always were a little, hard head or whatever like that. We're finding out sometimes with some relationships, after we dealt with it for a couple months, and even got an exorcist, it starts to become revealed this guy was always a jerk. And it's like, okay, we're going to expect to convert this guy, and he sounds like he enjoys communicating and whatever with the spirit. This is happening more and more too. Women, don't marry jerks. And then think you could later on when he starts to act more like a jerk that, you're going to make a case he's possessed, and then here comes the exorcist, and he's going to solve all your problems, and he'll be like the guy you met whose narcissistic tendencies wowed you. A good-looking guy, giving you flowers and knows how to handle a dance and all that stuff. You don't know the real jerk until you get married to him sometime. So some of these are actually cases of jerks. But since we're on that thing, you're going to be praying about this person and praying for them. And it might take longer because if they're a jerk, they're already kind of bred that way. They accepted it. Like, that's who I am. What am I going to do about it? I mean, they got this attitude sometimes, too. So Chapel of Divine Mercy, you can do deliverance prayers. You can do them daily to keep it off. He's living in your house, hopefully, to some degree. If it gets dangerous, that's not a hopeful thing. And because then they're hard to get out of the house. They won't leave. And then you got to worry about them, slitting your throat and you don't know. I mean, that's what some of these stories are, but the news never reveals it. They never reveal that backstory. Police found 21-year-old blah, 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 they'll give you this stupid backstory and they won't tell you what was going on with this guy before this happened. That's key. Like we know about the Andrea Yates and we know about Ronald DeFeo of the Amityville case. He heard voices. So what was Andrea Yates' excuse? She killed all the kids because she thought they were possessed? I mean, there's backstories that, they don't look into unless it's a mass murder. But when it's just one poor soul, there's not enough investigation on this idea. But a lot of them are, you can't say the devil made me do it, but a lot of them could have gotten to the extreme where it had temporary possession or something like that, or step in, which is kind of the same thing to a certain degree. Okay, in addition to that, you can do things like put a green scapular under the bed. We say sew it into the pillow. They always seem to find a way to find it under their mattress. Isn't that funny? Like the Princess and the Pea? That sew them into the pillow itself discreetly. Now, would they find a coin in there one day? Oh, they might. They might. But if you put the St. Benedict medal, maybe you sew it under the mattress on his side of the bed. You hide one in their car. Do all those things. Flood them with sacramentals. You want to do a rosary novena because this is serious. It's time to get the big guns out. It went to Mary, the bride and groom at the wedding of Cana went to Mary, and they approached her with the problem that they're out of wine already, and it's hardly got started. So Jesus turned water into wine because the Blessed Mother asked him, and he initially said, "Woman, it's not my time." He meant it's not. There's a timeline for when the miracle should happen. This isn't the place. But he did it because he loves his mother. Don't be afraid because you're trying to follow this fundamentalist. These are all new ideas. To not go to Mary and ask her if she could go to Jesus for you. And by the way, when you pray to some saint, you're always praying for intercession. You have to thank them for interceding on your behalf. Thank you, Mary, for going to Jesus and bringing that request. It's a very humble thing. That you're treating Jesus like a king. Like, I'm not worthy. I'm humbling myself by asking you if you could go to your son for me. Okay. We said this in another video. Some other things you can do, okay, besides the deliverance and a Chapel of Divine Mercy and a Rosary Novena, and continue that Rosary Novena until, you notice a breakthrough. And don't stop necessarily then on this kind of stuff because it's like anything. When something goes into remission, you want to make sure it's finished off, so you keep praying. The other thing you can do is when you cook for them, put holy water in their food. And everybody's going to be like, oh, wait, aren't going to go like this, like, they're going to turn into some, demonic beast or something? No, not necessarily. You'd be surprised. That is one of the tests that they have used in the past, even in the 1500s, the famous Nicole Aubrey thing where they put a little bit of holy water in the wine. All the cases, they didn't know that they did that. But in some more extreme cases, it'll happen where they act out. But we had a case in New York where the gal was falling under possession, and we had her put holy water in. There were step-ins, and they were fully possessed, too. She got an exorcism with the church, and in the long run, it turned out well. But when she did it, it was in order so she could eat the food. They wouldn't let her eat food. Her throat would lock up. So when she put 3 drops of holy water on there and blessed it in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, she could get her food down. And this is not the only time this has happened, and this is very common in those cases where they can't get the food down. They want to starve you to death. They want to deprive you of sleep. Okay, so that's something you could do to them. You can use holy oil, but make sure it's exorcised and blessed. Doesn't have to be in Latin, but it's always better when the sacramental language is used, the old language. That's what it is. Latin is a sacrament of the church in a language. You have sight, sound, symbols, images, all these things. There's sacramentals in a lot of them. Like the Sacred Heart devotion picture, for example, is a sacramental because it has special graces attached to it just by hanging it on the wall and honoring Jesus through this devotion. Okay, so some of the other things you can do, it's kind of endless, and when you get desperate, you'll say prayers of intercession, asking Padre Pio, the great saints. You can name other ones. St. Rita, the patron saint of the impossible. St. Jude is patron saint of the hopeless. I like the St. Philomena prayer, the faithful imitator of Mary, the little saint as they called her. And you can add several of them. It's more prayers offered. It's more penance and saying the prayers and devoting it to it, doing it consistently. And all of those things kind of add up to more prayer offering and penance. Persistence pays. It shows in the Bible where the woman ran to the magistrate and begged him every day to give justice to her murdered husband. And finally, after many days, Jesus tells the parable, by the way, he gave in because of the persistence. There's several things that message says, which I'm not going to get into right now, but consistence, we're fickle. Sometimes kids from the very early stage ask their parent for something and then suddenly you don't hear them ask about it anymore. It's usually after the first day. They don't want it that bad. Sometimes we got to go to the Father and we got to humbly ask on a daily level. Don't expect to say, Father God, could I please have my husband back? I don't really like him possessed. Amen. And then they wait around and look at their watch. What do people expect? Just as in a way they expect that people are going to be freed and delivered instantly. It's just over the top. It's not realistic. Okay, yeah, we're getting too close to too much time, and this is the difficult ones to do, but So what other things can I add in there besides that? If they could bless themselves before they go to bed. We're not even going to put that in there. I said you can say it when he's at work. You can say prayers on their behalf. You don't have to be right next to him and that sort of thing. God understands. That might even be risky. If you're doing that over them at night and then they wake up and grab you by the throat, don't push it on this stuff. If the person really is acting possessed, and I mean really possessed, and you better have gone over the list and been advised and all this stuff before you seek this, because don't start treating your husband just because he's having stress at work, as suddenly a possessed person, because you need to understand what the symptoms are and everything like that. And you might get obsessed with this from watching too many movies. Hopefully you're not doing that. And guys, you might act like just because your wife has changed since she's gone into menopause, that suddenly that's apply. You need to read about menopause, because menopause can really cause an extreme change, like night and day, because of some sort of hormone. It is, again, free will. Anytime we get hungry or we decide to overeat even, that's what you're dealing with these possession cases, is they decided they're going to maintain their lifestyles and whatever that keeps them there. Hostage. That's why you got nothing left sometimes but to pick at them away with a little small pickaxe, picking off that, with prayer, because you can't do anything yourself. You're going to find that you just can't. You're just going to have to start praying and have faith, because you're not going to be able to convince them. So I'm going to let that go on that. But it's just a matter of adding as much as you can. Go to daily Mass, go to Blessed Sacrament and Adoration and ask Jesus. All of these things. You might have to ask advice on a level of how to deal with somebody with this personality, and don't go to every priest and go, he's possessed. I can't get any. Okay, I better end this thing before I die of old age, literally. But Brother Kenneth here signing off, and for the Art of the Deals, we'll see you on the next episode, or rather you'll see me. God bless. 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 Me.